Amigos y amigas de Latino Media Network, mi nombre es Itzi Ortega y les doy la más cordial bienvenida una vez más a este programa Hablando de, donde cada emisión tenemos la participación de organizaciones, asociaciones o personajes que están haciendo un impacto positivo en la comunidad de Las Vegas y de sus alrededores. Y el día de hoy, en nuestro programa, tengo el honor de recibir a la presencia de la congresista Susie Lee, quien es representante del tercer distrito congresional de Nevada. La congresista Lee ha trabajado en temas clave como educación, salud, apoyo a las familias trabajadoras y su compromiso con la comunidad y su enfoque en políticas que benefician a los residentes del distrito la han posicionado como una figura importante en la política estatal y nacional. Así es que muchas gracias y bienvenida. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Latino Media Network.
Great to be with you, Itzi.
Thank you so much. There is so many topics that I would like to talk about in these times right now. And I know your background is a lot of community work, nonprofit work, especially to give kids opportunities, right?
Mhm.
That's how you kind of start your political
absolutely.
career, giving these after school programs with kids. For a lot of Latino communities, which we represent here in Latino Media Network, how do you want to ensure students still have these opportunities and this quality education for everyone?
Yeah, so thank you about that. I've been here for 30 years, and my career really was in the nonprofit world around education, founding the Inner City Games, which is now the After School All Stars, and president of Communities and Schools, which is a dropout prevention program. And in fact, before I ran for Congress, I was on the superintendent's committee that studied the inequities in education here in Clark County. And first and foremost, the most important thing is that every student should have a quality public school in their neighborhood. And we know that there's so many neighborhoods in our community. Over 60%, 66% of the students in Clark County qualify for free and reduced lunch, which is an indicator of poverty. Over 50% of our students in Clark County, or nearly 50%, are Latino. And so there is an overlap there. And making sure we provide the resources for those schools and making sure that we provide limited English proficiency programs as well. And so I've led a bill in Washington that will expand funding for Title I schools. Those are the schools that have the highest population of students living in poverty. And it's basically just recognizing that they require a little more resources. You have to, if you show up at school and you're worried about what's going on at home and you don't have food, how are you going to study? Or you can't afford glasses. And so providing the funding for those types of wraparound services is important. It's something I've always done. And then also, when it comes to higher education, making sure we're providing the resources so that all students have an opportunity for higher education. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to a 4-year school. We can provide Pell Grant funding for stackable certificates. So say you want to go into nursing, you start out as an LPN and then you want to become an RN and then you want to become a physician assistant, making it easier for students to access that type of financial aid as well.
And talking about education as well, it's unfortunate that Nevada has a deficiency of teachers in the district.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, that is a major problem. We've seen we are not able to hire enough teachers. And what ends up happening is that the schools in the poorest neighborhoods, which tend to have a larger Latino population, end up having long-term substitutes. And that's really detrimental to the development of the students because these are people who are coming in and out. There's not continuity. They don't know the students. They don't get to, parental involvement is so important. I believe that we need to increase pay for teachers. We need to professionalize the profession and, reward teachers who are good in the classroom. So many times, in order for a teacher to advance in their career, they basically have to go back to school, and then they end up having to go into the administration. Well, we know there are great master teachers in the classroom, and we should do more to reward those types of teachers to keep them in the classroom. It's so important. But ultimately, we need to pay teachers more here in Clark County.
Definitely. It has to happen. And moving with something that you mentioned about having food and certain basic requirements for students and kids to attend school and take advantage of being in school. But sometimes the food is not there, transportation is not there, even healthcare is not there. Kids are getting sick and they're not able to go to school. And that, if we translate that to the whole family, when people doesn't have, or families doesn't have enough of good healthcare or access to healthcare, it's also a major problem. In Nevada also, how do you think, or what is your plan of ensure access to healthcare for not only Latinos, but everyone here in Nevada?
So when you talk about access to healthcare, it really comes down to about four things. One is the affordability, making sure that people have options for the affordability. And that's why the Affordable Care Act was so incredibly important. There were so many people, including my own parents, who were priced out of the insurance world because they had pre-existing conditions.
Sure.
And so that was important. Putting millions of Americans on health care, which, by the way, my Republican counterparts in Congress and the man I'm running against, Drew Johnson, would love to repeal the Affordable Care Act and pull that type of health care protection away from millions of Americans, including tens of thousands of Nevadans. Then there's, just accessibility. And accessibility comes down to location and availability. We have a physician shortage, we have a nursing shortage. And so when someone gets sick, you can't wait 3 weeks to get treated. And so I have bills to increase nursing education. I have a bill to try to keep physician residents in Nevada. We teach them here, but then they go get residencies out of state. And if they do that, they don't come, they don't necessarily come back here. And then finally, accessibility, especially for Spanish speaking residents, making sure that there's limited English proficiency provisions put in. And so I'm leading 2 bipartisan bills that establish a task force to study how we bridge that gap and make sure that, when you go to the doctor, I speak English, they speak English, it's still hard for me to understand. So if you have that language barrier, it makes it even more daunting. And then making sure that we can also translate those adapting the language barrier for telehealth as well. So, but most importantly, it's affordability, making sure we have enough physicians here in our state, and also the accessibility. And, one other bill that I'm proud to have passed, it's a bipartisan bill, was called the Mobile Health Care Act. We know that there's so many neighborhoods here, especially in Clark County, where there's just they don't have transportation and there's no healthcare facilities. And so my bill basically says for federally qualified health centers, instead of getting the grant money just to build brick and mortar buildings, because you can only do so many of those, that they can now use that money to buy a mobile healthcare unit. So they can go into the neighborhoods or go to libraries or schools, once a week or once a month, so that people who don't have access to transportation can have an option right there in their own neighborhoods.
Makes more sense.
Yes.
And also, continuing with this topic about health and access to healthcare, being a woman, there is a lot of stake right now with all the new policies they want to introduce or they want to take away. How do you see this as women, access to women's healthcare and women issues in health? All these new policies or these ideas, how can you ensure women have they've been taken care of correctly?
Absolutely. This is a very personal issue to me, like all women. And, I grew up in a Catholic family. I understand the emotional and moral issues surrounding abortion. But I believe that that should remain with a woman and her family and her spiritual leader and her doctor, and that the government should have no role in making those decisions for a woman. I have two beautiful children. Nevada's 28, Cody's 20.
Oh, nice.
But I had 5 pregnancies. And so I struggled with infertility and I struggled with miscarriages. And I'll tell you what, I was, it was, I mean, I had the choice to make the decisions I needed to make. And now 1 in 3 women in this country who are childbearing age live in a state with either bans or serious restrictions on abortion care. And the bottom line is, to me, this is about a woman's freedom to make her own healthcare decisions.
Absolutely.
And what you're seeing too is when you start to see these abortion restrictions, especially like in Arizona and Utah, our abortion providers here in our OBGYNs here in our state have seen a doubling of cases coming into our state because they're prohibited in other states. But what that means is that women who live here now have a longer wait to access prenatal care. And because they have a harder time getting in, they're the same doctors who do prenatal care.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing a backlog for people to get in to get the type of care that they need to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy birth. And that's why in this country, maternal mortality is higher than any other industrialized country of our wealth. And so, limiting choices for women and controlling women's healthcare choices has an impact across the system and across all of us accessing the type of care we need to have healthy pregnancies and healthy births.
Do you think that access or freedom of reproductive care should be like a federal statement?
Absolutely. And I support a federal bill to protect a woman's right to abortion care, reproductive health care. Right now, there is a ballot initiative in Nevada to make it a constitutional amendment. But the bottom line is there have been bill after bill introduced at the national level for a national abortion ban. So if that happens, that would, supersede what happens in this state. So we do have a bill, the Women's Healthcare Protection Act, which would protect a woman's right to health care. And also the Access to Family Planning Act would protect a woman's right to IVF. Both of my children are in vitro IVF children. And so again, infertility is the disease and IVF is the treatment. And we need to be protecting that. If we say we're pro-family, there's nothing more pro-family than, protecting IVF.
True. This is a statement that normally when we talk about reproductive health, we refer only to terminate pregnancies or everything related with prenatal care, but not necessarily.
That's
As
right.
you mentioned, this is something I just recently learned, that also access to fertility treatment is part of these laws.
Yeah, that is sort of your most extreme anti-choice advocates want to go after even this type of care like IVF. And so that's why it's so important for us at the federal level to pass these types of bills that protect a woman's full slate of options. And by the way, you're also seeing in our state, we have a severe shortage of OBGYNs.
Sure.
And so when you see these bills coming down the line in other states and at the federal level that go after and try to prosecute providers, well, guess what? That's part of their menu of care options that they have. It is a difficult personal choice.
Okay.
And, I don't wish that choice on anyone. But if you do have to make that choice, I think it's a choice that should remain between you as a woman and your doctor and your family and your spiritual, guide, whatever that is. And that's where it should be made, not with, some politician in Washington or some Supreme Court. It should be a woman's choice and a woman's freedom. And that's what's so incredibly important about this fight, because we know that there are so many politicians that want to take away a woman's right to choose and control her own healthcare decisions.
And they can do it in an environment when their life is not at risk.
That's right.
True.
That's right.
And talking about the bills and all these women topics, historically, this time is when the highest representation of women are in Congress and in the House of Representatives. And that also historically is when most bills have been passed. So do you think the fact that it's more women representatives has to do with this amount of bill passed?
That women can get things done?
Basically. And what does that mean for you?
Well, listen, we come from a state with a great track record of women leadership. Our state is the first state to have a woman majority state legislature, women majority Supreme Court. We also have a woman majority congressional or federal delegation with Jackie Rosen and Catherine Cortez Masto, Dina Titus, and myself. And so Nevada leads the way. But in Washington, we're still not at 50% of women in the room in seats of power. And, listen, I pride myself on bipartisanship in trying to work together. I do believe that women come to the table with more of a spirit of compromise. And so I do think that that does play into it. But ultimately, I wish that Congress and my colleagues would be more bipartisan. I've been ranked as the most bipartisan member of Congress. I'm the vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is half Democrats, half Republicans, co-chair of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus. Ultimately, these decisions, whether you're talking about quality education, affordable health care, affordable childcare, affordable housing, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican.
Absolutely.
And people elect us to solve problems and get things done. And that's what more members of Congress should be doing.
Absolutely. Right now, the Latino community and immigrants community have changed the way they make money and they spend money. The spending power of Latinos have changed recently as well. So in the last decade, we've seen that 20% of businesses here in Nevada are owned by Latinos right now. Mm-hmm. So business owners are changing also. The face of business owners in Nevada have changed. How do you want to ensure that business owners, especially in Latino communities, have access to good opportunities to keep growing? And because this is also a benefit for the growth of Nevada, right?
Absolutely. Listen, our Latino population has fueled our economic growth in our community for decades. And making sure that we are supporting Latino entrepreneurs and business owners is important as well. And I've been, working to provide funding and establish a minority business development office and program, and also workforce development, making sure, it doesn't matter if you're a Latino business owner or Black business owner or white business owner, you still deal with the cost of goods and workforce, and making sure that and taxes, and making sure that we are providing a friendly environment for businesses is important, but also attracting those businesses. So with the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, we expect to see 180,000 new jobs created here in Nevada. Now, if you're a small business owner, you're like, how do I get a piece of that action, right? And we really have to make sure we're doing everything. And that's why the minority small business development program is so important, to make sure those small businesses are accessing capital, right? Because you can't grow unless you get capital to either buy the equipment or the truck or, the building, whatever you need. And so, and also build the relationships, right? So if you're you want to get that contract, that federal highway contract. How do we get those small businesses that are minority owned into being able to, competitively bid on those contracts? And that's why those programs supporting minority businesses and the Small Business Administration are so important. And I'll close with this. The Small Business Administration, we have seen an increase in funding and capital to minority-owned business in this administration. And that's really a commitment by this administration to make sure that we're providing the resources so minority businesses have the capital they need to start and expand their companies.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's very needed for having like a holistic growth in the state, and also having this holistic growth has to do also with representation and participation. Sometimes immigrant communities, not only Latinas, but in general, they feel that they have no access to that representation or they don't have a voice. So how can you ensure, what is your thoughts about all these communities raise their voice and have more civic participation to access those programs or access just to say what they need for the community, because they're like in the ground, they're like the ones that move the whole state.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is an important thing for Latinos and minorities and immigrants to have more civic participation?
Well, first of all, what you're doing right here at this station is important, making sure you're bringing leaders like me to chat about the issues so people understand what's going on. But also it's important to put people in seats of power who represent the communities that we have. And, we have a large Latino representation in our state legislature, but also making sure that people are getting out and organizing and voting. And, 88,000 Latinos live in my district. Last year, the president, or in 2020, the presidential race was decided by 30,000. My own race was decided by 10,000. And so it's really important that everyone exercise that right to vote, because that's your ultimate civic responsibility. That if you want to see things that reflect who you are and reflect your needs, and you want to elect representatives that are going to stand up for your needs, you got to exercise your right to vote. Definitely. But I will tell you, we have many grassroots organizations in our community. Dream Big Nevada, helping people with immigration and dreamers. Somos Votantes. We also have the Latin Chamber of Commerce. So there's many organizations here in Southern Nevada that are really focused at educating our Latino population on the ground and making them understand that, one, what the issues are, but also making sure we get people out to vote, because that's your ultimate voice in our democracy.
Absolutely. And tapping into the immigration laws, right now also it's a lot of stake, and there's a lot of debates of how people can turn their immigration status, if it's possible, if it's not possible. What do you think it is important to address in this debate about the immigration law?
Well, listen, our immigration system has been broken for decades. And if we want to talk about strong border security, then we need to fix our immigration system and have an immigration system that works. And right now, the legal pathways for immigrants to come into our country, and I'm going to say this loud and clear, that our economy depends on legal immigration. We need immigrants to come to our country, as we always have. Our economy will not grow without workers who come here. Absolutely. But we need to have pathways for them to come here. And right now, there are so limited pathways that so many people attempt to use the asylum system. And I'll just say two things. First of all, we have border security has been obviously in the press. And there was a bipartisan border security bill that was passed in the Senate that provided for asylum officers, that provided for fentanyl detection, The Border Patrol Union endorsed it. It passed the Senate, that's usually the higher hurdle to pass. Pass. And all it needs to do is come to the floor for a vote in the House of Representatives. But what happened is the former president tweeted that they did not want that issue to be solved because it would have been viewed as a win for President Joe Biden. And so, we need to quit playing politics with people's lives. And so I am on the Border Security Task Force. I'm also I'm a co-sponsor of the Bipartisan Dignity Act. Now, this is a bill that will open up additional, will clarify and and make clear pathways to citizenship. It will take care of our asylum seekers, legal, economic immigrants, as well as unaccompanied minors. It will provide for more funding for border security, and it will protect our dreamers. This is a bipartisan bill, Democratic co-sponsor, Republican co-sponsor. So to me, in order for us to have a system that is fair and fast and final, that people who come here, we should be able to provide them with a fair pathway and make a determination, and then that determination should be final. And so for so long, this has been thrown around as a political football, but ultimately our economy suffers and our families suffer. And we know we have so many dreamers here in Southern Nevada, people who are teachers, who work, are into our armed services, who provide for our economy, who are literally, came here through no fault of their own, contribute to our economy, and are in a limbo right now. Absolutely. And so that's why it's so important. I will remain committed, and I believe Kamala Harris will make it a top priority of her presidency, that we actually pass a comprehensive immigration bill, because that is the surest way for us to secure our borders, so that people understand what the rules are, that like I said, it's fast and it's fair and it's final. And to me, that's what's most important. And also to recognize that our economy needs immigrants. We need immigrants coming to our country, but we need to provide a fair pathway for them to get here.
And I want to recognize that, all the work that you've been doing as a partisan advocate, because I think ultimately the people that get empowered, it's to serve the community, to serve the country, their state, where they come from. And the way you get into power, it is important. But once you get there, you're serving everyone. Yeah. And that's how issues will be solved. And I think that you've been doing a great job. And I know you've been achieved so much, but looking beyond politics, is there like a personal goal or dream that perhaps haven't been achieved that you still like trying to make it happen that you can share with us?
Oh my gosh. So many things I do want to do, but I think as a mother, my dream is for my children to have a secure and happy life, like most parents in this country. I look at them, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Because with the threat of climate change, with the threat to all of our freedoms, especially for my daughter, even for my son. I mean, this affects boys as well as girls. But making sure that they're set up on a pathway where they pursue a career and have an education, and can afford to live and afford to buy a home. And so, as a mom, I think all of us, that is the American dream. We want to see our children doing as well or better than we did. And, right now, that's so hard for so many families. And that's why I ultimately ran for Congress, because, whether it's a livable minimum wage, paid family leave, so families, when someone gets sick, they don't have to give up a day of work and of a salary, and have that uncertainty, affordable housing, affordable childcare, affordable healthcare. All of those things, it's, the social determinants of security for families. And that's what's so important, and that's what I'll continue to fight for in Washington. And like I said, I have 750,000 bosses, and those are my voters. And those are the people who, they don't like what I'm doing, and that's why they exercising your right to vote is so important. And so hopefully I'll have the honor to continue to do the work for this community that I love so much.
Thank you. And just to finalize, something that is important and that I think important to talk about, because if we don't have an environment to live in, like a healthy environment, clean water, clean air, nothing else could exist.
Mm-hmm.
So why is important also this topic for you?
Oh, listen, my career started as working for an environmental consulting firm. And I think it might come out of the fact that I was one of 8 children, and my mom used to kick us out of the house every day, and you'd have to go play in the park and find things to do,
True.
Out in the outdoors. But more importantly, we live in the most warming city in North America. We've seen the water going down, the levels going down at Lake Mead. We are living through the impact of the climate crisis. And that's why the Inflation Reduction Act was such an important piece of legislation. It was the most significant investment in climate change in history. And, really a lot of the provisions in the bill were also focused on our most marginalized communities, because they happen to be the ones that are in the heat deserts, that, don't have access to the, air conditioning. And by the way, when you have rolling blackouts, where electricity gets turned off, it's your communities of color and your most marginalized communities that suffer the most. And also, the Inflation Reduction Act provides for tax rebates and incentives for people to make a transition to more energy efficient or renewable energy. And what's important about that is we know that a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, and they're not sitting on $4,000 to make an investment in solar or transition to a more energy efficient air conditioning unit. And that's why that bill is so important, because it provides for some of those rebates up front. There's a website called rewiringamerica.org. It's such an important website. You can go in, rewiringamerica.org. You can go into it and enter your zip code, your address, your income level, etc. And it can provide you with the how to access those tax refunds and rebates and incentives.
Yeah, because it's great. Electricity bills right now in
Yeah.
Nevada,
It's out. Yeah. And so, think about it. If you can get a tax incentive to go purchase a more energy efficient air conditioning unit, not only does it, help our environment, you're using less electricity, or a solar energy on your rooftop, but also brings down your electric bills, right? I mean, that's the big, more money in the pocket,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. Well, Congresswoman Susie Lee, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure having this chat with you. Anything else that you want to add that is important for us to know, to listen?
No, I just want to encourage everyone to get out and vote. Our Latino vote here in Nevada is an important voting block. When you look at the figures, it can decide right here in this state, our Latino voters could decide the future of this country if everyone got out and voted. And so that's why I think it's so important that we exercise our ultimate civic duty to this country, which is that right to vote.
Congresswoman Susie Lee, thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for being here until this moment. Thank you to your hearts and your ears for letting us accompany you till this moment. Gracias a sus corazones y a sus oídos por dejarnos entrar hasta sus hogares, sus trabajos, sus oficinas, donde quiera que usted nos esté escuchando. Siga en la programación de Latino Media Network. Mi nombre es Itzi Ortega. Esto fue Hablando de. Muchas bendiciones para todos.